Grab a cup and let's spill the tea. Your unabridged connection to mainstream news here on WHIP Radio, Philly's #1 college radio station. Hey everybody, this is Jon Dowding, and as always, you're listening to The Tea, where I spill the gossip and my unabridged opinions on stuff going on around the country. But I kind of want to step outside the US borders for this one, and surprisingly, I'm not talking about Puerto Rico this time. What I want to talk about is Catalonia. There's a lot going on there, and here's what you need to know. So, Catalonia, or Catalonia in the English pronunciation, is an autonomous region in the northeast of Spain along the eastern coast. Since the unification of Spain in the 15th century, the region has always talked about independence from Spain at some point or another. The region has its own culture, its own principles of governing, and even its own language, Catalan. The region has also been living with relative autonomy for the last nearly half century. So, Spain basically was a huge country of a bunch of different kingdoms. And by the late 15th century, it was reunified into one major kingdom. And Spain is extremely diverse. I mainly just want to talk about it because I love Barcelona, and Barcelona happens to fall in Catalonia. Catalonia is a beautiful region, it's a beautiful place. The thing is, Spain has always tried to suppress it on the grounds of unity and keeping the country together. Mariano Rajoy, the Spanish president, condemned a recent vote of independence for Catalonia from Spain, which was violently suppressed by police. Hundreds of people were injured because of the police interfering. And in a rare TV appearance, King Felipe VI condemned it as well, even though the voting results showed an overwhelming 90% of people in favor of independence. Obviously, if you know anything about statistics, if you get, let's say, 90 out of 100 people to come out for a vote and 90 of the people vote in favor of independence, then yeah, it's going to show 90% of people came out for the vote. The issue was not a lot of people came out to the vote because they were afraid of the police protests going on and the police trying to stop people from voting. Devil's advocate here. The country should stay together. The last thing we need in the world is another country, especially in Western Europe, that is trying to, that is having internal issues. It would be a completely new country, and it would disrupt an already fragile European Union, as well as the shaky economy of Spain in general. But speaking of the economy, the real reason that Spain doesn't want them to break away is because Catalonia makes up for 1/5 of the Spanish economy. And it is all because, like I said, of Barcelona. So many people go to Barcelona, and Barcelona is a major port on the Mediterranean. Most cruise ships stop in Barcelona. And a lot of times when you think of Spain, you think of paella, you think of sangria, you think of bullfighting, you think of, the running of the bulls. You think of that kind of stuff, and you may think of Barcelona, or you think of Madrid. 9 times out of 10, more people have wanted to go or have been to Barcelona. It is more touristy. However, this matters not just to us, but to the rest of the world, because we were once Catalonia, in a sense. Obviously the situation and circumstances were different, but obviously America was under the control of Great Britain, and we wanted to break away, and we did. We fought, and we were able to. But I feel like in an age where we don't need to fight, where we can easily be diplomatic, we should be able to discuss an alternative to fighting, and that would still grant and fulfill the desires of a certain people. And this matters to us too because, like I said, this would affect the European Union's economy. This would affect our economy because we're all tied together. As Pocahontas said, we're all tied in a circle in a loop that never ends. And she was right. We are all interconnected, This whole thing going on in Catalonia, it is important because it honestly, I think, could lead to the further dividing of Spain. Catalonia is not the first autonomous region to be overzealous for independence. País Vasco is home to a Spanish terrorist group called ETA, the ETA, and they were a group that tried to fight for independence of País Vasco from Spain, or Basque Country, during the time of Franco. They tried to fight for independence during the time of Franco for País Vasco, or Basque Country. They recently put their arms down and said they will no longer fight, whatever. But the fact that Catalonia is coming together and using diplomatic means as a way to try to vote for independence may spark the same situation across Spain. Spain is extremely divisive, and a lot of people don't realize that. I just wanted to talk about that because for me, Spain's a huge part of me. It's a huge part of who I am because I lived there for 5 months. Me personally, I think Catalonia should be granted independence. They're very independent from the rest of the country and different. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother session for a whole nother type of show. Speaking of Spanish speakers, some people are skeptical and some people are hopeful that San Juan residents react to President Trump's visit. After Trump's recent comments about the situation and the lack of aid being sent to Puerto Rico, some people have mixed opinions on 45's response. Trump tweeted Puerto Ricans, quote, want everything done for them when it should be a community effort. Trump also said that the devastation there did not match anything like Katrina. And he also said people in Puerto Rico should be proud so many people didn't die and, quote, everybody around this table and everybody watching can be very proud of what's taken place in Puerto Rico. Carla Sanchez, a bank employee in Puerto Rico, was pretty blunt about the whole situation when she spoke to somebody from NPR. She said, I think that it makes no difference in our situation right now. For me, it's a part of the show. That's all. Another woman said, it's good that Trump comes and sees the disaster Puerto Rico has to face, but I don't expect much from him. I think very interesting commentary, and I spoke about this whole situation on Rational and the fact that the U.S. doesn't care about Puerto Rico because, first of all, the people there don't speak English, so they don't care. Some people do, but it's a Spanish-speaking country. Two, the people there aren't completely white. But three, they're also not a state, so they don't care. And they're also in debt. It's like a triple, quadruple whammy, and that's why the government doesn't care. If they really cared about Puerto Rico, they would have tried to annex them as a state and try to help alleviate their debts. But we don't want to do that because why should we help them out? Even though we took them on after the Spanish-American War and tried to, and made them a part of the country and a part of the quote American empire, the United States' empire. But why should we help them? If you look on TV and you watch the reports coming in from Puerto Rico, the devastation there is horrible. People there don't have running water, they don't have electricity, they don't have lights. They don't have the basic necessities that human beings in the 21st century should and have been granted. And that's an issue. That is an issue we need to tackle. And Samantha Bee said it best. It doesn't matter the numbers of who died. It should matter that these people need their lives put back together because it's been torn to shreds. It has been torn to shreds by a hurricane that came out of the ocean, a big blue ocean, a big ocean of water and fishies and turtles and rocks and sand and all sorts of animal aquatic creatures. Yes, that ocean spurred a hurricane. The storm's devastated this island and it needs help. And you can't just say you're not going to help them because they already made their bed, so they're going to lay in it. You're completely correct. Puerto Rico did make their bed. They are in debt. But you know what? That's also our fault because we had the Jones Act, which limited the amount of trade that we could have going on throughout the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. And we also took a lot of manufacturing jobs out of Puerto Rico after we offered incentives to bring it back to mainland the United States. So whose fault really is it? And whose court does this issue really fall in? Definitely does not fall under Spain's. They got their own problems with whole Catalonia and all that, like I said. Not their problem. We took that land from them after the war. It's our fault now. We need to start acting like it. This will be the first time, and hopefully the only time I ever used The Onion as a valid source. I think The Onion said it best with the headline that came out after the Las Vegas shooting. No way to prevent this, says only nation where this regularly happens. So every time a mass shooting happens, the nation contemplates the same questions. Why did it happen? What made the shooter do this? How did it happen? Then major media outlets come out with the human interest pieces detailing the survival stories of some of the witnesses and the last moments of the victims. But the question that always irks me is the could this have been prevented question. In Australia, they did. Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop is offering to share with the United States her country's 2 decades of experience with gun law reform that dramatically lowered gun violence deaths. Australia credits stricter gun control laws enacted after a massacre in Port Arthur in 1996 for a dramatic fall in gun violence. The people down under had the right mentality. They saw an issue, decided to tackle it, and they have solved the issue. Devil's advocate here. This is America. We're allowed to have our guns. If I live in the middle of nowhere, we should be able to protect ourselves. I should be able to have a gun if I want. And you know what? I agree with that. If you live in the middle of nowhere and your closest neighbor is a tree and your other neighbor is another tree and their neighbors are also trees, then you know what? You do have the right to protect yourself. But we are not in the era of colonialization. We are not worried about Native American attacks because we already wiped them out decades ago. In regards to gun control, I think we need to to restrict the unnecessary automatic weapons that are causing these mass shootings. This was the largest mass shooting in American history. Over 50 people died and over 500 people were injured. This man literally had guns on guns on guns on guns in his hotel room, and yet he was just able to go on in and get it. Kellyanne Conway came out and said, well, it's Obama's fault that he was able to buy the device which turned the rifle into and pretty much like an automatic weapon. You could be completely right that the legislation was brought into public attention, public spotlight during the Obama administration, but what party is in the pockets of the NRA, and what party has refused to do anything, even after 20 kindergartners were killed and their teachers, and people who were in a nightclub in Orlando who were just having fun and being themselves in a safe environment were killed as well? Answer that question for me, then let me know what you think, because I'm about to go into it real quick. The GOP needs to wake up, because this whole issue of gun violence, it's on your court. It's not on the Democrats' court, even though it really is, because they aren't sticking up enough for it. But obviously they are limited to the bounds of a Congress and a Senate controlled by Republicans, as well as a Republican and a psychotic, for that matter, president. Republicans need to wake up and realize a Republican congressman was shot and almost killed. And you want to tell me that gun violence isn't an issue? When you allow for these massive rifles to be allowed on the streets, you just allow for the militarization of police, which just adds to police brutality and adds to the whole, deaths of African Americans and other minorities, and this unnecessary violence and controversy and just animosity. That's what it comes to. Violence creates animosity. And when you limit and inhibit violence, you can actually start tackling the issues. Now, I'm gonna say Australia is not perfect. They are extremely homophobic, but at least they are, and they have tackled one thing. We need to wake up and we need to realize what's going on, because if we don't, we're not going to be here to be able to fix it. And that's the tea I have for you this week. Thanks so much for listening. Hopefully things will be a little bit better in a week's time, and hopefully there will not be any more mass shootings, because Lord knows everybody needs a break. So thank you guys so much for listening. Tune in next week to my next episode of The Tea. Have a great weekend, everybody.